Michael, when it comes to the conflict in Ukraine, we've seen that Congress passed a new aid to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. At the same time, we've seen that on the battlefield in Ukraine, Ukrainian soldiers, even the far right neo Nazis, are surrendering at a level that we haven't seen so far in this conflict, in this war in Ukraine. And when you put these two pictures that the United States is sending more aid to Ukraine, at the same time, Ukrainians are not willing to continue this war. What's your understanding? What's your take on this?
Well, that's where my balance of payments analysis comes in. Not a single penny of the I think 63 billion is going to Ukraine. President Biden has made it clear that the money that's going to Ukraine is really going to American arms manufacturers. And Biden has said, we hope that you labor unions are supporting the war in Ukraine, because the money that we're giving to the American arms manufacturers have arms makers in every major state, Pennsylvania, Michigan, all the big states that are going to be decisive in the election. And so the money is really to build up arms for us to give to Ukraine when they're already in a year or two, maybe 3 years. So the money is all spent here. On the balance of payments, it is if there's an outflow of foreign aid to Ukraine and then an inflow of exports or export prepayments. It's a wash economically. So the money isn't really going there. There'll be a little bit of the bribery money to be all spent around. But what does Ukraine need US dollars for? When they pay pensions, when they pay their army, they pay in hernia. They don't pay in dollars. The only use of dollars is for bribery to the higher echelons of government to keep loyal to the U.S. policy of keep fighting Russia. And that's why you see, although the Ukrainian population is so impoverished, you see all of the fancy foreign cars in Ukraine, and everything seems to be happening. But Ukraine's already collapsed, and the only militarily, it's collapsed militarily, socially, and politically. The Azov battalion, for instance, of the right sector, is being asked, "Can't you go and fight? Because all we have, we're trying to recruit people, and we can, the people don't want to fight. I'm told the price is now $10,000 per person to be guided across the border to escape to Romania." To get out of Ukraine. So they can't recruit people. The trained killers, like the Azov battalion, said are really only there. They say, we're there to terrorize civilians. We can bomb civilian apartments, but we don't want to be on the front line fighting Russians. We want to fight the Russians, the Russian civilians in Donetsk and Luhansk, and just kill as many civilians as we can, kill the hospitals, and we want to do terrorist acts, but we don't want to actually go on the front lines because we could get shot. So just like the other Ukrainians feel. So the civilian population is doing everything it can to avoid being rounded up and just thrown into the front lines, maybe with slingshots. If they do give them guns, they're saying, well, here's a gun, you only have 20 bullets for today. You can imagine that when it comes to material, no matter how brave they are, they're completely overwhelmed by the Russian drones and the Russian army there. The Americans have made this almost comical, supposedly treaty making in Switzerland, and the Russians aren't invited. Only the Americans and their supporters are invited to say, well, how are we going to decide what's a fair result? The Americans have already announced that they're going to sue in international court Russia for reparations. when it's Russia has been so careful not to bomb civilians, not to destroy civilian property, but only focus on military targets. But the Americans are trying to start this legalistic lawfare against Russia, so just to prevent any possible trade or communication between them, because the American kangaroo courts will say, okay, America, Russia owes you $2 trillion for all the damage it's done by protecting itself, and you can grab Russian property anywhere. And so America has tried to invite global South countries and Asian countries to this meeting in Switzerland, and said, well, you don't have to sign a contract. You don't want to agree to what we're saying. We just want you there for the group picture, so we can give the illusion that it's the whole world against Russia. And obviously, that's not going anywhere. The Russians are very clear that on what they want. President Putin and Foreign Secretary Lavrov had made it clear that that Ukraine has lost. Russia is not attacking because Zelensky keeps sending these waves of Ukrainians in to get shot. And they think, well, at least every human body uses up one more bullet from Russia. And we're winning because Russia has less bullets, and that's all that we care about, not the Ukrainian lives. Well, Russia at some point is going to find the army so depopulated that then it can just march in, certainly to the Dnieper and certainly to Odessa, to protect the whole Black Sea coast, so that Ukraine will not be able to attack Russia again. And I think it's going to be very clear that if the United States tries to use and mount any missiles or aircraft from Romania or Poland, that or one of the Baltic states, that it will retaliate against these states. And Putin has already said that if there are arms or missiles coming, if it's a German missile, he'll retaliate against Germany. He said, this is already, we're not fighting against Ukraine. We're fighting against NATO. And we're aware of that. We have no compunction against bombing NATO, but if we do, we're going to take out do what we've done in Ukraine. We'll take out their electricity. We'll take out their power supply, their water supply, anything that is of military service, including presumably the American spy installations and electric installations, where they're giving guidance to who the Ukrainians should attack, just as the Americans are guiding Israel and where to attack in their surrounding countries. So the United States doesn't want to admit that it's lost. And again in the US press, you have the statements by the Americans that if we lose in Ukraine, we're going to be losing face. And if we lose face, then Asians will think that we can't defend them. And Taiwan may think, oh, we don't want to end up like Ukraine, that we will be destroyed. So there's a feeling that somehow Ukraine is the proxy for the bigger war that they're planning, and that America will lose the allies that they think they might have if the allies say that the NATO and American arms don't work. And obviously the Patriot missiles don't work. The American arms have been shown in Ukraine to be not really very good at fighting. They're good at parading, and they cost a lot of money to employ American labor in a kind of Keynesian, the alternative is to build pyramids, but we're building arms to employ labor. So that is basically happening, but the war in Ukraine is essentially over. And Russia says, well, we're willing to negotiate, but our negotiation is, here are our terms. They're really unnegotiable. The negotiation is you get to sign your surrender, and you get to give us what we want. You've got to arrest the Nazi groups there, the Azov battalion, the right sector, so that the Nazi groups will not be there. You've got to promise never to have arms again. And we realize that what we're leaving in Ukraine is a tiny little landlocked country, but that was their choice. That was your choice, and the Americans can refuse to sign it. And I think I'm not sure that World War II has ever been settled. I think they're still waiting to do the treaty to settle the Korean problem, the Japanese problem. Well, they're not. May not be a formal settlement, but on the reality battlefield, there's going to be there, and the result is going to be a split, a geographic split, and Ukraine is going to be the dividing line. You'll have the West on the other hand, and you'll have Eurasia on against it. The question is, at some point, what's Europe going to do? Europe is already been defeated by the United States and is now an economic colony of the United States. At what point will the Europeans see that they're depopulating, that their industry is moving either to the United States or to China, and then give up? That's really what's up for grabs sometime in the future.
Michael, if Ukraine ends up to be a landlocked, if Russia takes Odessa, Nikolaev, what would happen to the western part of Ukraine? We know we have various ethnicities in that part of Ukraine who would not be happy with the situation of Ukraine being a landlocked. And how do you see the future of Ukraine in that scenario?
I'm sure that there still can be a railway there, and there still can be grain exports. But here's the problem: that the Ukrainians, in order to raise the money, the Ukraine is the most corrupt Western country in the world. The Ukrainians don't own the farmland anymore that you're referring to. The farmland has been sold to Blackstone and to George Soros and to other people. Oakland Institute every few months writes a whole report on how the Americans have built Ukraine. The Americans have said they want to take Ukraine is to dump atomic waste and chemical waste in there. The Americans say this is great. If we can use Ukraine as a dumping ground for chemical waste and hazardous waste, it's called, and radioactive waste, then there goes Ukrainian land, and now the world will be even more dependent on American grain exports. I mean, this is really evil. The thought of taking the most fertile land around and just poisoning it. But if it's not poisoned and it's used to actually grow crops, the Americans own it. Well, how long can their ownership remain intact? Certainly, any land that they own that they have bought in the areas that Russia will absorb, Russia will say, this is not a valid ownership. We own it now. We're going to turn this land over to the actual users, to people who used to be Ukrainians and are now Russians to use. We're certainly not going to let the Americans who bought it for pennies on the dollar, as they say, corrupt. All of this was corrupt dealing with a government that did not represent Ukraine, but represented the result of the coup d'état. The Maidan coup d'etat. So the question is, will the Ukrainians fight for the American buyers, or will the Ukrainians who have this land wanting access to the sea to export make a deal saying we're going to use the Ukrainian land to export grain, because that's what we do. And we're not going to be military. We're going to simply export it by train to the ports. And of course, the Russians will let them use the ports there, and they'll have access to the sea, even though they're landlocked, as long as they don't revert to the Nazism, or as long as they don't become a NATO appendage as they are now. So that's an easily solvable problem. Russia will say, well, you brought it upon yourself. Until you behave like a civilized country, you're going to be landlocked. And we realize already their population is plunging. Nobody's having children anymore because half the family is living in another country. And they're going to look like Latvia and Estonia and the Baltic states that have been neoliberalized. So I guess there will be some negotiation. Do we want to give some of Ukraine to Hungary? Because the Ukrainians have been, we talked about who they're trying to draft. They're not trying to draft Ukrainians as much as the formerly Hungarian-speaking and Romanian-speaking populations in Ukraine. They're trying ethnic suicide again to send them to the front. It's really these are Nazi ethnic racists who think an ethnicity is a race. And I think that Russia would be quite happy to make a deal with friendly countries such as Russia, and maybe even make Romania more friendly by giving Carpathian mountains back to back to Romania. So all of this can be in motion. The United States really has nothing to offer except chaos. And the question is whether other countries will be able to put together an alternative to chaos and stick together. And the Americans will try to use bribery and blackmail. I mean, they certainly have enough blackmail on the Ukrainian politicians to say, well, we can throw you in jail with what we have. Don't you want to do this? That's how it's going to be unfolding, and it's going to be. I'm sure there are going to be all sorts of stories coming out, and the whole denouement of all of this will. This is a turning point for civilization that's happening right now.
We had Olaf Scholz going to China to convince Xi not to help Russia to win this conflict, this war in Ukraine. At the same time, we had Janet Yellen as well, went to China visiting Xi.
It's hilarious.
It's unbelievable. Michael, in your opinion, when she looks at Olaf Scholz and see a leader who was not going to stand for the right in the Nord Stream pipeline, that it was a devastating sabotage against Germany and its economy. And when they see Olaf Scholz ready to risk everything in Germany in favor of the United States, right now he's going to China to talk, to negotiate with. Does she take these guys seriously? Because it doesn't make sense in the point of view of Chinese.
Well, he's doing what he's told is a ceremonial visit. There's needless to say, there is no chance that Mr. Scholz is going to be reelected. So he's going as somebody, and you know that he's going to be out of office in the next election. But also, that what does he have to offer? There's nothing that he has to offer, because Germany's been the economy's been destroyed economically, just as Ukraine has been destroyed demographically. And you can see what China's thinking. The U.S. attack on China and Russia and Iran and most of the global majority has driven China and Russia together. And the United States has said again and again, and in Congress and in Biden speeches, we have to fight Russia first, because Russia has the ability to defend China for when we have the big war with China in 2026. And while we're preparing to go to war with China, we want to make sure that it doesn't have any support from Russia. So you can imagine when Schultz is going to Russia and say, please don't do anything that will help Russia support you in the coming war that the United States is threatening you with. I'm always surprised at how polite the Chinese are. They take him out for dinner to a nice Chinese restaurant. They compliment him on how nicely he uses chopsticks, and they're very polite to him, but they're not going to do anything. And you would have thought that they'd simply laugh at his face or have some minor official do the talking. But this is, you said, Secretary Yellen went out and made the same demand, saying, please don't export steel because we want American steel workers to be employed. And instead of laughing or just saying, well, discussion's over, the Chinese press was very polite about her there. They all said, oh, she likes all things Chinese. She loved the restaurants. She loved the food, and they tried to make her popular, not by showing any kind of antagonism at all. And I'm beginning to worry that China keeps thinking that it can show a win-win policy to Schultz to bring back to Germany and saying, look, here's how you can trade with us and do well. There's a company in the Netherlands that makes ultraviolet etching equipment. We want to buy that from you. There are many things that we want to buy from you. You can move your invest here. You'll do very well. But Schultz can't do it because he's really a puppet of the United States, and he can't do anything but say, gee, I wish I could, or we will discuss that back in Germany. But everybody knows that nothing's going to happen there. So China's acting in a way that I think it must surprise the West as just how polite it is, and its faith that somehow, because objectively, if you look at if all countries acted in their economic self-interest, there wouldn't be a war. If they acted in their self-interest, and the materialist approach to history says, well, then of course Europe and China should make a rapprochement, just as Russia and Germany should make the rapprochement, that we're enriching both countries in mutual gain, each country gains, but they're blocked from that by the United States saying, no, it's all or nothing. You have to choose sides. It's either the global majority or us, the 15% NATO West. Who are you going to choose? And by the way, you want your children to go to Harvard University? We can arrange that. And about that contribution that you got 10 years ago, that was really illegal. You wouldn't want that to come out in the press, would you? So basically, that's the level at which are. So Schultz is going through the motions, and dumb as he is, he has to know that this is what's happening, and all he can do is follow the script, and says, I'm just here as a straight man. And China will humor him and pretend that it's all there, somehow thinking that if they can be polite, they're sending a message, if not to the United States, at least to the global majority, to say, we're not we're being polite, we're always willing to negotiate, we would like to make a peaceful deal where everybody gains, and if a deal isn't made, we've done our best to do everything. We have not made any belligerent statement against the West. All the belligerence, all the threats are by the West. All of the defense is by us. So you have a belligerent West and a defensive Eurasia, global South, global majority. That's what it is. So I don't think you can pay any attention to Russian politicians until the next election, which is still a few years off. Unfortunately, I guess there's some European Union elections that are coming up, and probably von der Leyen lady wants to be the head of NATO. So it's just going to be it's going to be so aggressive a vocabulary that's used that I don't see how NATO can survive under conditions where Europe is steadily losing its economic power to the United States, and NATO really is what it was set out to be in 1949 or whenever it was founded. I think to pull Europe in to the American Cold War that has now become yet a new Cold War against not only Soviet Russia that doesn't exist anymore, but against the whole rest of the world, except Israel. So that's basically the situation that we're in.
Is there any viable choice for Russia and China, instead of deepening their partnership, going to have some sort of compromise and cooperation with the United States? Because at the end of the day, we know that the United States is not willing to get along with these two countries. How deep, in your opinion, how deep is the relationship, this partnership between Russia and China? Because in the United States, you hear every time politicians are talking about separating China from Russia, Russia from China.
There's an even deeper relationship, and that's the break between Russia and China and the West. And Putin has coined the new word that in English is non-agreement capable. Putin doesn't believe the West anymore. And he had come into office basically as a neoliberal. That was one of the reasons why Yeltsin and the American advisors behind him urged appointing Putin. He, like most of the administration, and including Medvedev at the time, were neoliberals. Putin now feels that he's been tricked and cheated by believing the Western promises, and he realizes that the West promises to Russia are no better than the American promises to the American Indians when it made the treaties saying you can have this land and stay on it. He realizes that there's no way of making a deal with the United States, and he realized that the United States has turned Europe into a dead zone. He realizes that Europe has nothing to offer, not only economically, but also culturally. And so what began as a purely economic break and a break over economic policy, neoliberalism over a mixed economy, has become a civilizational question for Putin. He's talking about Russian religion. He's talking about the Russian character. And it's really a difference in human behavior between Asia on the one hand and Western Europe and the United States. The Christian behavior has always been antagonistic and refusing to compromise, always treating everyone who's not on their side as an enemy instead of making a deal with them to live and let live. So given the fact that Putin realizes that there's no chance of a rapprochement with Europe and America until Europe breaks from NATO and finally says we've made a terrible mistake, we've thrown the rascals out, and we want unity. Putin has no Western option. His only option is to work with China, despite the fact that there were many Russian-Chinese tensions in the past, including during the Vietnam War. So, and from China's point, it wants Russia's support, realizing that the American attempt to attack and destabilize Russia and to send the ISIS terrorists into Kyrgyzstan and the Central Asian border states are all an attempt to prevent their coming together. And China's ideal is to unify all of Eurasia and to extend this unity to the global south, to Africa and as much as Latin America is possible, and to create a harmony to reduce the threat of war. So when President Xi and President Putin say that their alliance is unbreakable, I think they're telling the truth, that is realistic. That's not just rhetoric, that there is no other choice, as Margaret Thatcher would say. The any hope of conciliation with the NATO West is over. It's not possible. And that's why the fighting in Gaza and Israel is so important. Somehow, on an emotional level, that's added a whole dimension to the intellectual break of realizing, well, wait a minute, we need our own economy. Of course, a mixed economy where the government will subsidize research, subsidize living standards, provide basic needs for society, and not permit a financial oligarchy from developing, such as the United States is trying to sponsor. There's an alternative. Well, that's become a civilization issue now, that they see the brutality that the United States is using, both in Ukraine and in Gaza, to try to say, this is the alternative to your surrender, rest of the world. The rest of the world is saying, then we've got to act, this is so abhorrent, seeing the pictures of the just the killing civilians, picking them off by snipers, killing the doctors, bombing the hospitals. This is so abhorrent to civilization that that has led them to think we've got to work out the economics and the legalities and the institutional forms that we need to form to really break with the West. That's really what is being brought to a head right now. And China is basically part of the West. It doesn't have anything to offer because it's all living in the short term. And the problem with the West is it doesn't have a plan B. I think we may have talked about this before. There's only, when I was talking to government bureaucrats, there's always, here is what is decided. This is what broke up the CAA and what has led people like Ray McGovern and the other people that are on other shows and on your show to talk about, why they couldn't work with the USA anymore. They said, well, they didn't want any dissension. And when McGovern, or when other people would try to say, here's the reality that's happening, the neocons would say, well, that's not our reality, and that's not what we want. You're not a team player. They isolate them, and they ignore whatever the good CIA and State Department advisors used to say. Now they say that you're not a team player, get out. So there's no team B. You can't say, well, wait a minute, there's a problem. I think in case what you're saying really doesn't work, and in case I'm right, here's plan B, where world peace. No. They're emotionally driven to war. And so the United States really doesn't have a way of thinking about the plan B, world peace, and working together for mutual gain. Their only mode of thinking is, what can we do to hurt them hard enough and to bomb them enough and make them feel bad, just as in Gaza and Ukraine, so that they'll realize, well, it's not worth really fighting that much. I guess we'll give in. It's better than dying. That's plan A. And that's the only plan there is. But you've seen NATO's used all of its weapons in Ukraine. What does it? All it has is the atom bomb. And what worries everyone is they're crazy people. The neocons are crazy. I mean, I've known them. You get in the room with them and you leave, and it's like it's purged any feeling you've ever had of antagonism, revenge, violence. You're purged just being with them, saying, oh my God, this is where that cancer lives. And that's basically what's happening, that they may be violent enough to try to use their one weapon, the atomic bomb. That's their only weapon left in plan A, and there is no plan B. That's what's so frightening.
I've sent you a photo of how China's economy is changing, and the China's rising trade, and how they're shifting their economy little by little from the west to east, from the west to the global south. How do you see the future of China's economy?
Very positive. There's a fight now about how do they cure the financialization that's occurred of their economy, especially in real estate. And when people thought the one form of saving they thought they had was to buy real estate, well, that led President Xi to say houses are to live in, not to make fortunes on by being an absentee loaner. Owner. So what you're seeing now is the tension between Shanghai and Beijing that's been percolating ever since I was there 20 years ago. That Shanghai was always the pro-Western financialization, free market, you would call it, anti-government economy. Beijing was always trying to manage the economy, but its genius was in making a compromise that actually worked. It led enough of the free market and private enterprise developed so that it was able to develop ByteDance and the computer systems and the phone systems and all of the other companies that have become world leaders in what they're doing to become the center of steel making, aluminum making, rare earth metals refining, other metal refining, taking the lead because they are doing just what the United States and Germany did in the late 19th century when they were developing their own industrial development by using government to subsidize research, development, to subsidize the key industries that they thought were necessary to become leaders in their own economy and other economies, and to prevent dependency on other economies. That's why China built up dollars basically as a means of holding down its exchange rate to stop it from going up by recycling the dollars into the United States. But now it's realized that it doesn't need foreign financing at all, that it can create its own money and its own banking system. And Chinese banking doesn't lend for corporate takeovers or corporate raiding or for stock buybacks to push up the prices. They don't have all of the paraphernalia of finance capitalism that's really destroyed in industrial capitalism in the United States and Western Europe. So they're taking an engineering approach to most of this. Very logical. What do we need to grow? How do we provide the financing? How do we avoid dependency on foreigners that can lead us prone to economic sanctions that can hurt us? And now, how can we bring other countries into our orbits by expanding trade and connections with other countries? You know that 500 years ago, a decision was made in China. They had a big navy, many ships, and they decided, we don't want contact with the West. We want to just be by ourselves. We're rejecting the West. We've seen the Christian missionaries that have come. We don't want any part of that. If Christianity is what the West is, it's a killer ideology. Well, now they say, well, the world is all tied up with one another, not only for minerals trade and agricultural trade, but there's no way of avoiding being part of the world. And if we're going to be part of the world, then we're going to have peaceful instead of militarily belligerent relations with them. So let's show other countries that our way of development and our socialist philosophy of a mixed economy, public enterprise, pushing for education, for public health care, to raise the quality of labor is the way to go. And other people will join us, and we can all work for mutual gain. And we'll make sure that when we build the Belt and Road Initiative, and when we build ports for them, that we don't use debt leverage to treat them like the Americans have treated debtor countries to it. We're not going to use debt to impoverish them, but to take our payments not in financial currency, but take it in the form of basically raw materials, what they can produce. So that everybody will have a means of producing, and there won't be a buildup in dependency relationships, because we'll all help each other become economically independent, but with each country doing its particular role in what's going to be an integrated global economy. Whereas the United States wants to break up the economy and prevent other countries from being producing their own means of self-support so that they're dependent on the United States. China wants to help everybody with the means of support, realizing that China is by population, the biggest country, will end up as the largest beneficiary because it's the largest country, but it will not be an exploitative relationship that such as the United States and Europe as the West supports.